Hello everyone, this is G and I'm back with the second video of the day, which I didn't think I'd be doing, but I figured I should give my take on this because, well, it involves The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, right? If you smell what The Rock is cooking, cue the theme music, right? Now, for newer subscribers to my channel, you may not know this, but I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. I've been watching pro wrestling off and on since I was about 8, 9 years old. Excuse me. And I just turned 37, so for a good chunk of my life, right? And I've watched pretty much every major promotion, especially when wrestling was especially popular in the late 90s and in the early 2000s during what was called at the time the Attitude Era, right? You had WCW, which was the more family-friendly company, and you had WWF, which was, more of the edgy company, right? They had Stone Cold, they had The Rock, they had DX, they had Sable, right? And their brand was basically to be as in your face offensive as you could. And for those wondering, no, I did not forget ECW. I just wasn't a fan of ECW, so I won't be talking about them. But The Rock was a huge part of that era, right? Especially when certain stars like Stone Cold got injured, or when certain people like Shawn Michaels retired due to back injuries and personal problems, right? That Shawn has since been very open about. And The Rock came into his own, which I was fine, which I'm fine with, right? The Rock was a big part of my teenage years, even though he wasn't my favorite wrestler at that time. I have a great respect for what he did in the ring. I think he was a full time performer for about 6 years, and then he went part time because he was transitioning into movies, and now he's fully Hollywood. I have no problem with this, right? I have no problem with the fact that he got out of the business early. If anything, for his health, it was probably the best thing he could do because the longer you're in the business, the more it wears on you. There's a huge problem, a huge culture with drug use and drug abuse and alcohol abuse. And honestly, many of the stars and many of the talent that The Rock worked with, right, when he was a wrestler, did not get out alive, literally. It's not uncommon to watch a show from 20 or 25 years ago and note that at least one person in the ring, right, from the past is now passed on, is now dead. So, in a general sense, I'm very happy for The Rock that he moved into movies and he seems to have a very privileged, charmed life. I don't begrudge him this in any way. So, you may be wondering, well then, Gene, what's this video about? This video, like my previous video, is about hypocrisy. And let me explain. So you see this tweet at the bottom from a Don Winslow, right, who is a #1 international best-selling author, The Border, The Forest, City on Fire, author of 3 New York Times Critics' Choice Best Books of the Year, right? So he says, Dear The Rock, you're a hero to many people in using your platform to defend Joe Rogan, a guy that used and laughed about using the N-word dozens of times is a terrible use of your power. Have you actually listened to this man's many racist statements about black people? Now, while I'm not a fan of Rogan, I lost a lot of respect for Rogan when he made comments that pretty much exposed himself as an anti-gaming boomer. I've watched a lot of his podcasts, not everyone, naturally, right? Because there's hundreds of them, but I think I've seen enough to know that while he may say some off color or offensive things, right, that let's be honest, all of us say, right, or have said, I haven't come across anything yet that can definitively call Rogan a racist, and I would not ever refer to the man as such. And for me personally, having grown up in an inner city neighborhood, right, while I don't like the use of the N word, I don't like the word as a word, I also know that context matters. This is something just some guy tweeted about earlier in the day, how the context, the use of the word matters, right? Because the N word, especially amongst other black people, can be used in a term of greeting, right? So I don't automatically lose my head when somebody, whether they be black or non black, uses the N word. Unless you're using it, honestly, in a like very overt, insulting fashion, and you're using it toward me especially, I don't much care, right? And then there was some comment, something floating on the internet about how Rogan once referred to black neighborhoods as Planet of the Apes. To which I say, I don't care what Joe Rogan thinks about black neighborhoods. And let me tell you something that most probably wouldn't want to admit to. There are a good number of black people, especially those who live in the inner city, who might agree with him on the whole Planet of the Apes part. Because having grown up in an inner city neighborhood, still living in an inner city neighborhood, I can tell you, it gets wild over here. I've heard way too many bullets whiz past my window at night, especially during the summer. I have come out in the morning to walk to work or whatnot in the morning and seen blood spatters in front of my building, right? I have come across pot smokers and other people doing drugs. I literally left the building one time because I was going to visit a friend, but the floor she lived on, who I don't know if it was one person or several, but the stench of marijuana, like I have a very sensitive nose. So the stench of marijuana was so thick, I literally got sick and had to leave. Okay? Growing up in the hood, growing up in the ghetto, the projects, whatever you want to call it, is crazy. So I think there are plenty of people, whether they admit it or not, who have grown up in that environment, especially if you come from like New York City, would probably agree with the whole Planet of the Apes crack, right? It may not. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, that ain't right. It's true, but it ain't right. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Here's the reason why I'm making this video, because now I'm going a bit off topic. The reason I'm making this video is because of The Rock's response to this, right? He says, "Dear Don Winslow, thank you so much for this. I hear you as well as everyone here 100%. I was not aware of his N-word use prior to my comments, but now I've become educated to his complete narrative." Oh, really? Really, Rocky? Really, Dwayne? DJ? You've become educated to his complete narrative. So you're telling me you yourself sat down, watched every video Joe's ever done, watched every single video of the Joe Rogan experience, which goes on for hours and hours and hours, right? It could be 3 to 4 hours long per video, per episode, with all the different guests he's had. Women, black women like Angela Hill, for example, who's an MMA fighter, right? He's had Jordan Peterson on. He's had doctors on. He had Dr. Gupta of CNN on recently. He's had Dr. Malone on, and guess what? Dr. Malone probably wouldn't have ended up on Joe Rogan's show if Twitter didn't shut his uh, Twitter account down. No, nobody ever thinks about that, right? But Rogan's interviewed everything from rock stars like, Shirley Manson of Garbage. He's interviewed athletes of all different types, Rose Namajunas to all different types, right? Men, women of every background. So you're telling me, Rock, that you sat down, watched every single episode available on YouTube, watched every single episode of video available on Spotify at present. And keep in mind, Spotify has just taken down 70 to 100 of Rogan's video now that were on their platform, and he has, to my knowledge, hundreds of videos up there, right? So you're telling me you sat through all of these videos so that you have a complete knowledge and understanding of Rogan's, as you call it, narrative. I don't think you've done that. I don't think you have the time or the inclination or the interest to do such a thing. This is not The Rock becoming educated to what Joe Rogan believes or stands for. This is The Rock capitulating under the pressure. This is The Rock cracking under the pressure of his not new, because he's been in Hollywood for a while, right? But this is basically him being a Hollywood actor, right? He's being told that he can't support Joe Rogan because Joe Rogan said these very bad words. And he's bowing under the pressure, which is sad but not unexpected. But the reason why I'm making this video is because of the hypocrisy of The Rock. Well, you may be thinking, what hypocrisy? Well, here's the thing. Look back to his wrestling career. His whole gimmick, his whole wrestling persona, what got him initially famous in the business, which is very hard to break into even if you are a second generation star, right? Because both sides of his family have very strong ties to the wrestling business. But the persona, the gimmick that got him over was being very young, brash, cocky heel, or which means bad guy for those who don't know pro wrestling. Heel character initially, who just said whatever he thought. Right? Anybody who's familiar with The Rock's wrestling work, in particular his character work, his promo work, right? That's when two wrestlers come to the ring and they insult each other and they promote the next match or the next show or pay per view coming up or whatever. That's pretty much how you move the story along in pro wrestling, right? The Rock's promo style was incredibly dependent on him being as funny, obscene, profane, and offensive as he could be, as he could get away with at the time, which was a lot because it was the late 90s and the early 2000s, and it was very different then. Literally, one of his many catchphrases was, The Rock's gonna take his boot, shine it up real nice, turn that some bitch sideways, and stick it straight up your candy ass! That was literally one of his many, many, many catchphrases. Not to mention the several times he openly hit on women, right? Constantly made jokes about Lillian Garcia being wet. Lillian, for those who don't know, was like a backstage presenter type person or a ring announcer, right? But made constant jokes about her being aroused around him, made constant jokes about himself having a large penis, right? Made constant jokes at the expense of men like, say, Michael Cole, who's a commentator, right, calling him a hermaphrodite, other backstage talent that he would make fun of on screen, right? On screen, he would say these things, right? There's a clip that I saw Tim Pool was sharing where The Rock is cutting a promo against Mick Foley, who was known as Mankind at the time, and he's mocking the way Asian people talk, right? The whole ding dong that that whole thing. He's mocking the way Asian people speak, right? The Rock, as a pro wrestler, constantly spoke about how much he loved pie. And by pie, I mean cherry pie, as in the Warrant song from the early 1990s that was clearly about sex. So imagine what pie he was talking about, what pie he was gloating about, right? He made his entire brand and image, as many stars of that time did, on being openly offensive. And I want to be clear, I have no problem with this. It was funny. It was entertaining. It helped him make his wrestling career, as brief as it was. And it's precisely why he was initially noticed and he got hosting jobs on SNL, right? And he ended up in the what was it? The Mummy film, right? The Mummy and then the Scorpion King, and that's sort of how his acting career began to take off, right? It was this macho, brash, profane, funny persona where he was completely unfiltered and he mocked and made fun of everything and everyone, and nothing was off limits, including race. The thing is that The Rock himself has used the N word. He famously used it when he was cutting a promo, I think it was on SmackDown, against a wrestler named Booker T, who was a black man, right? Now, to be fair, I do think The Rock didn't mean to say it. I think it's one of those things where he got caught up in the moment, right? But he has said the N word as part of a promo, right? On national TV, right? Booker T himself, years ago, back when he worked for a company called WCW, World Championship Wrestling, used the N word in a famous flub where he was cutting a promo against Hulk Hogan, who, as we all know, is a white Italian man, right? And Booker goes, "Hulk Hogan, we're coming for you, Nick!" Right? And he can't stop himself, and you see the woman in the background, Sherry Martel. Just the way her expression changes when he makes that flub is hilarious. But here's the thing: The Rock has said incredibly offensive things. He's used the N word, right? He's offended all types of people, or at least been offensive toward all types of people. He literally shut down a white man's career. He shut down his run. He cut that promo against Billy Gunn, and Billy Gunn's career never recovered in WWE, right? And on top of all this, right, he has worked for many years for Vince McMahon, and to my knowledge, he still has a very strong and healthy relationship with Vince. Vince McMahon, who's long for those who don't know who Vince is the owner of WWE, right? Vince has long been criticized by talent and by fans, past, present, and no doubt in the future, for his treatment of black talent over the years and for his racial insensitivity in general over the years. Right? Many would argue that unless you became a big star like The Rock, if you were a non-white person, that you kind of got the shaft, right? When it came to Vince, he would give you very offensive gimmicks like Samba Simba, right? And all of this other stuff. It's like the only thing worse you could be working for like WWE was like Japanese, because seriously, up until Asuka, Japanese talent just did not get a fair shake in WWE. I'm just saying. But my point in all this is that The Rock made his name, right? He got his first taste of fame because of his offensiveness, because of the fact that he made sex jokes, racial jokes, used racial language, used the N word at least once, right? Worked for a company that did not care at the time about anybody's sensitivities, racial or otherwise. But now that he's a big Hollywood star and people don't generally remember him or recognize him for his wrestling work, now he wants to cave, right? He wants to cave, he wants to crack under the pressure and apologize, right? I wasn't aware of his N word use. What does it matter to you? Did he call you the N word? Right? And now, of course, people are digging through The Rock's past, which I don't really agree with. And they're digging up old tweets like he called some woman a tranny or whatever, like in 2011 and all this other stuff. Now, that I do disagree with. I don't see the point in going through his Twitter to find, offensive tweets. At the same time, though, I can understand, well, I don't agree with it. I can understand why people are doing that, because it's like, well, now you've set yourself up for it. Because if you're gonna, judge Rogan because of the words he's used, then people naturally are gonna look into your own past and see what less than kind things you've said. So, in my opinion, for whatever it's worth, given The Rock's background, and here's the thing: this is not stuff like that was done in like secret, right? He did this all in public for the entertainment of the millions and millions of his fans in the ring, right? Being profane, being offensive, mocking everything. But now he wants to turn against Joe Rogan. I personally don't think Rock is actually offended by Rogan. I don't know if he likes or dislikes him, but I don't think he's offended by him. He's doing this because now the cool in thing to do when it comes to Joe Rogan in Hollywood is to, label Joe problematic. Like, he's spreading misinformation. Now he's a racist. And to be fair, Joe's had the mob coming after him for a while. And it seems like of all the things that have sort of like caught up with him, this whole, old rock star boycott of Spotify seems to be the thing. It's like I honestly thought that was gonna like blow over, because like who in the hell cares about what Joni Mitchell or Neil Young or Elvira think? But apparently this has picked up steam, and now right the in thing is to basically take Rogan, who's just an MMA comedian dude bro, right? Who's willing to sit down and have conversations, right? Whatever my disagreements with him on gaming, I'll give him credit for being willing to talk to nearly anybody. But now, the in thing to do and the in thing to be, right, is to basically point at Rogan and go, burn the witch! Or would it be burn the warlock, right? Basically, cast him as the most evil thing in the world, right? This is cancel culture, but in my opinion. What Whoopi Goldberg is going through, being rightly criticized for her incredibly insensitive comments about the Holocaust and the Jews, whatnot, and being suspended, to me, is not cancel culture, because no one's trying to silence her. She's serving a suspension for doing something very dumb, and let's be honest, with her money, so long as she saved it, it's effectively a vacation. She's not being censored. People aren't going after her for no reason at all. People are going after Joe because Joe doesn't toe the party line, at least not yet. He might start to, right? Or he may be looking for a new platform. Spotify just might drop him, right? But Joe at present doesn't toe the party line, and what's worse is that he openly questions why the party line is the party line, right? Since he will not, at least right now, since he will not bow, right? Now they try to smear him. He's basically getting the Gina Carano treatment, in my opinion. So I hope, like her, he holds his ground. But he's put out 2 apology videos recently, so who knows? But I do find this tweet from The Rock to be incredibly funny, given how profane he has been in his easily searchable past. All you gotta do is just go on YouTube and type in The Rock best promos, and all you'll hear is just sex joke, another sex joke, race joke, calling the male interviewer hermaphrodite, more sex jokes, making fun of Kurt Angle and his milk. And then, finishing off with a catchphrase where he threatens to take a boot and stick it up someone's butt. This was it. And again, I have no problem with it, right? But don't suddenly act like you're a saint now, right? And act like that stuff never happened. You never said those things. Because this is the thing about cancel culture. The past comes back to haunt you. They don't know how to leave the past in the past. To them, your past is not something that exists, but most of the time should not be used to judge you now, right? They view the past as a weapon, and if you have anything in your past, and everyone has something in their past, whether it be their personal past, their Twitter past, whatever it is, that can be used against them. Or if you don't, you will eventually, right? As Jesus himself once said, let he who is without sin cast the first stone, right? Or if for Twitter, he who is without sin, let him cast the first tweet, right? In my opinion, people should leave Rogan alone. And in my opinion, The Rock should stop caving the moment someone slightly criticizes him, right? Or tells him, you can be doing better. No. The Rock got to where he is because free speech and profanity and offensiveness was in. And it would be nice if he would defend those same principles for Rogan, even if he may or may not personally like Rogan or agree with his views, right? Everybody wants the ability to speak, but nobody wants to stand up for the other guy and allow him to speak, right? Everybody's like, stand up for me and let me talk. But nobody wants to do the same for the person who is smeared. Until you're the one who's smeared. Then you want everybody to, stand up and defend you. Right? But that's the thing. So I just find it interesting that he would say this. And then he tweeted at some woman I saw. Some woman or whatever apologizing for what he said to her. I should have shown up better. I wasn't at my best. Nah, man. You told her what you thought at that time. The only reason you're apologizing now is because you didn't want to end up like Rogan and Carano. Guess what? Too late. You already represent that toxic masculinity, given that you're big and you're strong and you star in all these action films. Trying to play like you're the big giant Samoan version of Mr. Rogers ain't gonna work here. Okay? It would be better for you to own your past, right? Than to try to literally whitewash it, as in like cover it over and paint it over and act like it never happened. Because believe me, everybody's going to start bringing up every rude thing you ever said. And you spent years of your life saying incredibly rude things for a white guy who paid you to do it. Just remember that, Rocky. But anyway, that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye.